Cleveland is losing residents every year. So is Pittsburgh. So is Toronto. By the rules of economics, rent here should be crashing. Instead, it's rising faster than almost anywhere else. I found 5 hidden reasons why, and they'll change how you see every shrinking city. Here's a case file that doesn't add up. Cleveland, Ohio. Population dropping every single year. Pittsburgh, same story. Toronto just posted 0 population growth in an entire year. Vancouver lost 21,000 residents to smaller cities in 12 months. By every rule of basic economics, rent in these places should be falling. Fewer people means fewer renters, means empty apartments, means landlords slashing prices to compete for the few tenants left. Except that's not what's happening. In Cleveland, rents didn't fall. They climbed nearly 6% in a single year, faster than almost anywhere else in the country. In Pittsburgh, vacancy rates went up, and rent went up right alongside them. That's not supposed to happen. Vacancy and rent are supposed to move in opposite directions. So, what's going on? Why are people paying more to live in cities that fewer and fewer people actually want to live in? I'm the price detective, and today we're opening the file on one of the strangest contradictions in the modern housing market: shrinking cities with rising rent. And once you understand why it's happening, you will never look at a population decline headline the same way again. Let's start with the assumption everyone makes, because it's the assumption that makes this case so interesting. We're taught that housing prices are a supply and demand story. More people competing for the same number of homes pushes prices up. Fewer people competing for those homes should push prices down. It's Econ 101, and most of the time, it's true. That's exactly why booming Sunbelt cities like Austin and Atlanta have actually seen rent fall recently. Those cities built so many new apartments during the pandemic boom that supply finally caught up with demand, and in some cases overtook it. Landlords in Austin are now handing out discounts and free months just to fill units. That part of the story makes sense. But shrinking cities are breaking the pattern completely. Population is falling. Demand on paper should be falling too. And yet rent keeps climbing. If you only look at the headline number, "This city is losing population," you'd expect a renter's paradise. Instead, in city after city, renters are finding the opposite. Fewer people and yet a tighter, more expensive market than ever. This is where most explanations stop short. They either shrug and call it a mystery, or they blame the usual suspect, greedy landlords, and move on. That's not detective work, that's a guess. Let's actually follow the evidence. Here's the first thing almost every headline gets wrong. Population and the number of households are not the same number, and they haven't moved together in decades. Households have been getting smaller for the better part of a century. More people living alone, more couples without kids, more retirees whose partner has passed away, still occupying and needing an entire unit by themselves. Every time a household shrinks from 3 people to 2 or 2 people to 1, that's a new unit of housing demand created out of thin air, with 0 population growth required. Take Cleveland specifically. One of the fastest growing renter groups in the city right now isn't young professionals. It's residents aged 65 to 74. Roughly a third of Cleveland's entire population is 55 or older, well above the national average. These are often 1 or 2 person households that used to be 3 or 4 person households decades ago in the same city in the same housing stock. So even while Cleveland's total population ticks downward, the number of households competing for rental units can hold steady or even grow. You can lose people and gain renters at the same time. That single fact alone breaks the simple population equals demand model that most people carry around in their heads. Here's the second clue, and it's the one most YouTube explainers skip entirely. Not all vacant housing is usable housing. In cities like Pittsburgh and Cleveland, a huge share of the existing housing stock is old, sometimes over a century old. Some of it sits vacant, but vacant doesn't mean available. It means abandoned, structurally unsound, tied up in legal limbo, or owned by absentee investors who have no intention of ever renting it out. Researchers studying these cities have found that much of the affordable, lower-rent housing stock is quietly becoming obsolete, falling apart faster than it's being replaced. Meanwhile, almost all of the new construction that does happen in these cities targets one narrow slice of the market: higher-income renters who want modern finishes and amenities. That new housing doesn't replace the lower rent units disappearing at the bottom of the market, it exists in a completely different price tier. So picture the market as two separate lanes. In the luxury lane, there's actually reasonable supply. But in the lane where most renters actually live, the affordable mid-tier lane, the supply is shrinking every single year, even in a shrinking city. When the pool of usable, affordable units gets smaller faster than the pool of people who need them, rent in that lane rises, no matter what the population graph is doing. Now for the third clue, and this is where things get a little uncomfortable. Over the last several years, a growing share of residential property in exactly these kinds of cities, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Milwaukee, and others, has been bought up not by individual landlords, but by investors operating through LLCs, limited liability companies. On paper, this just looks like a change of ownership. In practice, it changes the rules of the game entirely. LLC ownership makes it much harder for tenants, journalists, or city regulators to even figure out who actually owns a building. That opacity has been directly linked to higher rents and to a pattern where owners let properties deteriorate, because the legal and reputational risk of neglecting a building is so much lower when nobody can trace it back to you. Some of these owners aren't managing housing as a place for people to live. They're managing it as a portfolio of assets, and portfolios get optimized for return, not affordability. This matters because it decouples rent from the local, human-scale reality of the city. A landlord who lives in the neighborhood and needs to keep tenants happy behaves differently than an investment fund 3 states away that owns 2,000 doors across 5 cities and needs to hit a target yield this quarter. When enough of a city's rental stock shifts into that second category, rent starts responding to spreadsheets in a boardroom rather than to how many people actually live down the street. Here's a subtlety that almost never makes it into a headline. Who leaves a shrinking city matters just as much as how many leave. In cities like Pittsburgh, researchers have found that population decline is now driven more by natural decline, deaths outnumbering births in an aging population, than by people packing up and moving away. And the rising share of the people who do migrate out are retirees, heading to warmer, cheaper states. That leaves behind a population that skews older, skews toward smaller households, and, critically, often has different housing needs than the people who left. An aging population that stays put tends to occupy units for longer, moves less often, and doesn't free up housing the way younger, more mobile renters do. Combine that with retirees who are asset-rich from decades of home ownership, but income modest, and you get a group that can still support, and in some cases, even outbid younger renters for, smaller, well-located rental units, especially as more of them transition out of homes that have become too much to maintain. So the population number keeps sliding down, but the composition of demand is shifting in a way that keeps pressure on rents right where it hurts renters most. Let's talk about vacancy rates directly, because this is the clue that ties the whole case together. In Pittsburgh, vacancy actually rose, up to about 6.5%, and rent rose too, just at a slower pace than the year before. That's not a contradiction once you understand that vacancy isn't distributed evenly across a city, it clusters. Higher-end, newly built units in desirable pockets of downtown can sit vacant while landlords wait for the right tenant at the right price. Meanwhile, the affordable units in the neighborhoods where most people actually want and need to live stay essentially full, because there's nowhere else for those renters to go. Average citywide vacancy can tick up because of a wave of luxury construction in one corner of downtown, while the market that ordinary renters are competing in remains just as tight, or tighter, than it was the year before. If you only read the top-line vacancy number, you'd think renters have the upper hand. If you actually try to rent a normal, affordable apartment in a normal neighborhood, you might find the opposite. So, let's put the file back together. A city can lose population every single year and still see rent climb, because households are shrinking faster than population, because the affordable slice of the housing stock is vanishing even as luxury units get built, because ownership is consolidating into investors optimizing for yield instead of neighbors optimizing for stability, because the people who remain often have different and sometimes more resilient housing demand than the people who left, and because vacancy numbers can rise citywide while the market that actually matters to most renters stays locked up tight. None of this is one villain, one policy, or one headline. It's 5 separate forces, each subtle enough to hide in plain sight, all pulling in the same direction at once. That's exactly the kind of case worth investigating, the kind where the obvious answer is wrong and the real answer takes some digging. This is what this channel is going to do every single episode. Take a price that doesn't make sense on the surface and follow the evidence until it does. If this is the kind of investigation you want more of, subscribe, because next time we're opening a new file. And trust me, the numbers on that one are even stranger. I'm the price detective. Case closed, for now.